I must set aright that which has been made wrong.
Sometime in about 2017, when I was still very new to board repair, an original PlayStation 4 came into the shop with a broken HDMI port. It was the first time I was attempting a HDMI repair, and I still had my starter toolkit with my crappy 2-in-1 rework station. It did not go well. My hot air station couldn't get enough heat into the board, and I ended up ripping a whole bunch of pads under the connector. With nowhere near enough skill or equipment to repair the butchered traces, I ended up buying another PS4 on eBay and swapping the motherboard.
So I butchered someone's PlayStation, then I made good on it, and shipped them off with a PlayStation that worked, and I kept the old broken one. And it's been sitting in the back room for ever since. So here we are today in 2025, and I want to play Bloodborne, because that's a current game. But I don't own a PlayStation, although, well, technically I do. I own this one. So I'm going to open this one up, and I'm going to have a look at it and see if my modern skills can fix a butchery, a crime that I did many years ago. Let's open this thing up and get the board out and see what we're up against. Oh man, I did not put any of the screws back in this thing. Although at the time I just had a very bad day of butchering someone's PlayStation, and obviously when I slapped the board back in this one just to keep it safe, at the time I had no illusions that this thing was ever going to work again. I guess I kept it just for spare parts. Huh, interesting. I did put a port on there. Why did I put the port on? I already know I tore a whole bunch of traces on this thing. Right, so I did put a port back on. I think maybe I thought I was going to run some jumper wires and start trying to work on this one, but I got far enough in to realize that just I did not have the skill at the time to run the missing wires, because they all go through vias and stuff like that. Ooh. I took off this cover. I don't know why. There's damage around there, but I think it might work. I definitely didn't have a microscope when I was looking at this thing. Oh hey, that doesn't look so bad. That's only, what, 3 torn traces? And it's none of the signal traces. Okay, let's get this port off and have a look at what condition the pads are in. And yeah, we'll see what we can do with that. It's possible that I could just run 3 jumper wires from there and just run them around the board, but I don't trust this soldering job in the slightest. Like, that's not soldered on properly right now, and I could make good on that, but I'll just rip this off. I thought there was no port on this thing anyway. So I'm going to start just by reheating these anchor points with my modern soldering iron, just to get some heat into those pins. And then we'll go in with the hot air, and this guy's probably going to drop straight out because it's absolutely not soldered on properly. My concern is if this guy still works. I think that's my only doubt in this project, is just I reckon I can put a new port on, but I don't know if the rest of the board actually works or not. So let's find out. So looking at this now, it's cleaned up. It's really not as bad as I remember, but at the same time, originally when I was working on this one and I had, very bad equipment and no microscope, I can absolutely see why I was unable to deal with this. But by the looks of things, we've got multiple torn pads here, but I think we can solder down to these. That'll be okay. But we've got 3 completely missing pads. This guy looks like it's a no connected because that it doesn't have any traces going to it. This guy's got a trace going to this via. This guy's got a trace going to that via. So if we can find out where those 2 vias go to, where they connect up, then we know where we've got to run our jumper wires to. These vias are exposed on the back of the board, so I could just run a wire around the board and then solder directly onto the via. But soldering onto vias is kind of janky, and if I can find out where these actually go, we may be able to just run the wire to a component, which is far easier. So I'm going to see if I can find a board view for this that will show me where those vias are actually connecting to, because that'll make my life a lot easier. Right, didn't have any luck finding a board view or schematic for this. It may exist, but a quick Google search wasn't coming up with results. And I thought, you know what, for the sake of 2 pins, how hard can it be to find them? So I did a little bit of buzzing out. I've just scratched the solder mask off of these 2 vias and just started poking around some of these test points with my probes. And I found that this guy on the right here connects to the back of this diode, and this guy here, that connects up to this test point here. So we've got 2 spots on the same side, so this is the side the connector will be on, so we've just got to run a wire from like here to here and here to here. I'm just going to quickly confirm those just to make sure I haven't forgotten which way around they are. So I'll put the multimeter into beep mode and we'll just buzz those out. So one on the left, which I think was this one. Yep, pretty good. And then one on the right. There we go. Cool. So I'm going to clear these anchor holes of solder, and I'm going to put a nice shiny new HDMI port on there. Where's the old one gone? I singed the old one slightly because I wasn't careful in taking it off, but it's in pretty good condition. I'm going to go full send. I'm just going to put this one back on. So yeah, I burnt the back of it a little bit because I wasn't trying to be careful, but you know, this is fine and the inside looks fine to me. So yeah, let's roll with that. There we go. Right, that guy's in place. That's pinched in quite tightly now, so let's come under the microscope and start working on our pins. Right. That's not very good. Let's just see if we can pull out those bridges. We'll do all of these properly when we've got all of our jumper wires hooked up. I know we're slightly out of focus here, but I'm not looking for a perfect finish here. I just want to make sure that I can't easily knock the HDMI port askew. Right, that's not super clear, but I don't think there's any bridges there. Oh, I can see a pin that's completely off kilter though. Yeah, you didn't get any solder, did you? These pins are going to have a little bit of movement on them because a lot of the pads have shifted. But if the pad moves with the pin, then we're okay. Yeah, those are fine. Alright. So I've got some super thin magnet wire here, and I'm going to try and tin the end of it with just a little bit of solder, which will melt the enamel coating on the wire. Although that already looks like it's slightly tinned on the end, but I'll do it again anyway. So let's just get a little bit of solder on you. That'll do. We want as little solder as we can get away with here. I'll put a curl in that wire so I can come in at an angle. And we just need to tack that down to that pin there that doesn't have a pad. There we go, that's on. The slightest touch is all we need. There's so little thermal mass in these wires that as soon as you actually apply the heat, they'll solder like that. This is not as hard as it looks because, as you can see, just a tiny tap and it's soldered on. By comparison, if I was soldering down to one of the vias, the reason why I didn't want to solder directly onto a via is because then you've got to get heat into the via, and that's embedded in the PCB. So you've got to get a sizable amount of heat onto a tiny, tiny surface area that is essentially wrapped in a heat sink. So soldering onto vias kind of sucks. It's absolutely doable, but if we can solder onto the back of pins and contact pads, that is an awful lot easier. So we're just going to take this guy up here. I'll go around this capacitor. I just scratched the board just so I could see where to put it there. This isn't a terribly professional job, but this is my PlayStation, so I'll scratch the motherboard if I want to. Right, and I just want to scrape that wire and just burn the enamel off of it. I think that'll do it. So I'll put my probe on that pad and back to the pin. Nice. Yep, that's down. Boink. Right, that's one done. So these wires are going to cross over, but it's okay if they touch because the enamel coating means that they won't short out. But I will do a continuity check just to make sure of that. So let's get our wire prepared again. Come on, there we go, that's what I want. I'm going to catch that leg. Damn it. Bounced off. Oh, I think I had it then actually, and I think I just pulled away. Right, that did solder on, but I'm perilously close to the pin next to it, so I'm going to redo that one. Just going to tilt around just so I can get the iron around that corner again. I want to get right on top of the pin. I'd settle for being on the right of it, but on top is perfect. Oh my days, I had it again then. See if I can get my fingers a bit closer to the end of the wire. Alright, I made a bit of a hash of that, but it's under the pin and that's close enough. Send it. Alright, that's on. Get out of the way, solder. So we're going to come up and over the top of this guy here. It's going to go on like that. Now I just need to put a little solder blob on the back of that diode. I think these are TVS diodes, these guys. Because that's a ground pad there, so I think this is a TVS diode that's just providing some static shock protection to whatever this signal is. I could look up what these two signals are, but it doesn't particularly matter. There we go. Right. That's not my greatest jumper wire work. However, we're on. That is soldered on. So we'll just do another continuity check now. So firstly, we'll check from that pin there to the back of the diode. Yep. And it doesn't go to ground. And also, it doesn't connect to the other pin. So this crossover is not conducting. Excellent. And as a friendly reminder, that third missing pad that we have here, that's a not connected pin. So what we've got here is we've got 4 data pairs. So these are the important ones. There's a pair of wires with a ground between them, pair of wires with a ground, pair of wires with a ground, and so on. Then these top ones here, there's a ground in there. One of them is EDID, which is the monitor sense pin, where the monitor tells the device, "Hi, this is my model number. These are the resolutions that I support." So if EDID doesn't work, then the PS4 will not detect what resolution it should be at and will probably fall back to like 640 by 480. It's not the end of the world if that doesn't work, because you can manually set the resolution, but obviously you don't really want that on a customer device. Then one of the other ones is I can't remember what the other pins there are actually, but it's a couple of sort of support pins, you know, clock pins, that kind of thing. Maybe some serial data, I'm not sure. But yeah, the 4 data pairs, those are the super important ones. Okay, right. I'm going to throw all this back into the chassis and see if it works. I'll clean it up and I'll put some thermal paste on. I was tempted to do a dry test where I just don't bother putting thermal paste on and just, you know, see if it works and then bother to put thermal paste on. But that's the only thing. So for the sake of just a bit of thermal paste, let's just, you know, finish the job. We'll approach this pretending that it's going to work. Oh, also I've got to just solder these other pads up, so I'll just quickly do that. So I'm confident about the repair work that I've just done. The question is just if the thing actually works. The most likely thing to be a problem is that at some point while wrestling with this thing in the past, I just cooked this HDMI chip. I don't know how big a deal it is to replace that. If it doesn't work, I guess I could see if I can find a new chip. If it doesn't work, I might just give up on this thing and just buy a second-hand PS4. I could probably get a console on its own for like 50 quid on eBay or something like that. But like I say, as per the title of this video, I would very much like to right that which I have made a wrong, you know. I think everyone who does repair at some point in their early point has butchered something and been extremely not proud about it. But that's part of the learning process. And being able to come back and either repair a job that you butchered or succeed where you previously failed is a very validating experience, which is what I'm here for. Oh. Yeah, we're going to run into problems here because once I put the board back into place, that's going to go in roughly like that. Then this back plate goes on top, and it's going to have it needs a spring across there, which applies pressure and actually pulls the heatsink onto the CPU. And I'm missing that spring, so I'm going to have to find some bits for this. But hopefully I can put this together just enough that we can do a test and see if it's going to work, and then I'll find those extra parts offline. Let's do a thermal pad check. So we've got one there, two there, one there, the other one there. All the thermal pads are in place. That's nice. And the back plate, yeah, all of the thermal pads are present for that as well. Good. So at this point, we put the spring down and put the two big screws into there, and that will just sandwich all of that together. However, with it resting in place, I wouldn't be comfortable running it under load like this, but that's good enough for a test. I wonder if this hard drive has software on it. I wonder if this hard drive works. We'll find out. Right, place your bets, folks. I'm going to get power and HDMI. Here goes nothing. Right, we have a blue light. Now we want that to turn white, if my memory serves me. The fan changed speed, that's a good sign. It power cycled. Ooh, we have signal. Ooh. No, that's not okay. Alright, we've got a white light, a high fan speed, and the signal is coming and going. Holy moly, these things can get loud. Alright, stop. Okay, right, so this is the point where I'm going to come in with my CMI Zapper HDMI chipmunk. I'm going to plug this guy in. So this has got an array of LEDs on it that are going to show us which signals are present and not present. This will pretend to be a monitor, so it will show us if we've got an EDID, and it will show us the 4 data pairs. So from here, we can make a reasonable assessment as to what's working and what isn't. Okay, so we've got EDID. That's a good start. Oh. Okay, it flashed. It gave me a red flashing light 3 times and then cut out. Is it overheating? I mean, it might be. That looks like it was going to work just then. Right, I'm just plugging it in over at the burn-in station. I'm going to do the same thing again. The chipmunk says that HDMI port is going to work, or implying that it works. So, yeah, let's send it again with an actual monitor attached and see what we get. There we go. It's a capture problem. Cannot start the PS4, connect the DualShock 4 controller using USB and press the PS button. Okay, so it came up saying that the contents of the hard drive was shagged and it needs to reload all the software. Not a big deal, we can do that, but we got a picture. The picture wasn't HD, it was at potato resolution. However, again, the chipmunk said the EDID was working, so I'm confident that once the software is reloaded on that, it'll shift into native resolution. So I think that's a winner. However, also, the moment that I let go of the console to go and plug in a gamepad, I immediately heard the fan start to ramp up again. So yeah, like there is no testing without that spring clip on there. The board will just separate. So I absolutely cannot run it without having all the screws in. A week later, and I've got a new retention bracket from eBay. I haven't bothered trying to source any other screws because there's no plan to sell this console. I'm keeping it to play some PS4 exclusives and Blu-rays. I've also put the hard drive on test with C-Tools, and by some miracle it's passed a full sector scan. You might be wondering why I'm not putting an SSD in this console, and that's because a 1TB SSD is basically worth about as much as the whole console. I've never really played on a modern console, so it's time for me to find out what that 30 FPS and hard drive load time lifestyle is really like. Now the console isn't trying to immolate itself, I can insert a flash drive with the PS4 recovery image and see if it'll sort the software out. This is pretty straightforward on the PS4 as you don't need to do any kind of button sequence. It even took surprisingly little time as well. Once it's past the initial recovery, we've now moved into 1080p, which confirms that the HDMI port is working. And shortly after that, I'm on the first run wizard. And there we have it, folks. That is one fixed PlayStation. So thank you everyone for tuning in. Thanks as always to my patrons, my channel members, and my Twitch subscribers for supporting my content. Hope you found that interesting, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye for now.